Good morning in the United States and good afternoon in Europe. My name is David Deisner. I'm the Executive Director of Atlantik-Brücke, and I would like to welcome you, our members and friends on both sides of the pond, to the second edition of our virtual Battleground Tour. Today's video call is part of a series of digital events co-hosted by Atlantik-Brücke and the Congressional Studies Group on Germany of FMC. Since 1952, Atlantik-Brücke has been dedicated to strengthening transatlantic dialogue and mutual understanding between decision makers from the US and Germany. And the virtual Battleground Tour is a great opportunity to continue the dialogue during the pandemic, which of course keeps us from traveling. Just a brief housekeeping remark to our participants. Please send us your questions and remarks via the Q&A function of Zoom, and we will try and include as many questions as possible. With this series, we focus on those American states that are of particular importance for the outcome of the 2020 US election. We are most delighted and grateful that Garlin Gilchrist, Lieutenant Governor of Michigan, and James J. Blanchard, former Governor of Michigan and former US Ambassador to Canada, have taken the time for today's discussion. Gentlemen, it's great to have you. We are most delighted. Thank you for taking the time. And with that, I would like to hand over to you, Governor, as you have kindly agreed to lead today's discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Good morning. Guten Morgen, I guess I should say. I'm a member of the former members of Congress, and I can't see anybody, but I'd like to welcome you on behalf of the former members of Congress, which is a very active organization and active in programs in Germany. I should note that as governor of Michigan many years ago, in the late 80s, early 90s, I was very much involved with Atlantik-Brücke and hosted one of the conventions here, annual meetings, and attended two in Berlin before and after the fall of the wall. So and of course, I'm aware of the longstanding connections between Michigan and Germany, particularly through the auto industry and manufacturing. And it's always been close ties of investment and cultural ties as well. We had a special guest today who is one of those rising stars in politics and government in the United States. He is the Lieutenant Governor of Michigan, Garlin Gilchrist II. He has a really interesting background, I might add. His mother worked for General Motors, his father for the U.S. Defense Department, both in the areas of manufacturing and technology. When you meet him in Michigan, he stands out in a crowd because he's 6'8" and played basketball in a lot of different places. But that kind of belies the fact that he's been a real scholar. He was a graduate of the University of Michigan in computer science and computer technology. He was in business with Microsoft for several years. He led technology efforts in Washington, D.C. with different organizations, and also created the first, I'm going to have to see what it's called, Department of Innovation and Emerging Technology for the city of Detroit. Our relatively new governor, Gretchen Whitmer, who was elected 2 years ago, selected Garlin Gilchrist II as her running mate. And so the two of them have been serving in Michigan since January 1st, 2019. And they faced enormous challenges: economic, trade, civil rights, race relations, and of course, recently, the tragic pandemic of COVID-19. Garlin Gilchrist has emerged in our country as one of the bright rising stars of American politics and government. And I welcome him. And he's going to talk about what's going on with the elections or whatever else you want to talk about in Michigan, which is a key battleground state. You may recall Donald Trump carried Michigan by a narrow margin of 10,704 votes. So our goal here as Democrats, now we're Democrats, is to change that and deliver Michigan. And someone in the center of that effort, in the center of the effort that everything that goes on in our state is Garlin Gilchrist II. And so let me present our Lieutenant Governor to you. Garlin?
Governor Blanchard, thank you so much for the introduction. And David Patrick, it is such an honor to be here with all of you. I very much appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to converse and connect with leaders from Europe and from the United States. I had the chance to spend some time in North Rhine-Westphalia last November with a delegation of some of my fellow lieutenant governors from the United States, and learned a tremendous amount about that state, which is actually quite similar to the state of Michigan. So I'm appreciative of the opportunity. But I'm here to talk about American politics. I'm here to talk about the election in America and where things stand. And I think more importantly, where we have an opportunity to go. So as Governor Blanchard shared, yes, I serve alongside Governor Gretchen Whitmer in the state of Michigan. And we are a state that is really at the center of this election process and the process of really what governing through a pandemic looks like in the United States. Governor Blanchard described that 10,704 vote margin. That is the most narrow margin that President Trump won any state. And so we are the battleground of the battlegrounds, the bellwether of the bellwethers. We are the state that is the swingiest of swing states. And so this year, we've been thinking about a lot of things to make sure, number one, that as many people as possible can vote in the state of Michigan. So alongside the governor and I, there were several ballot initiatives that were citizen-led that were placed on the ballot for people to vote on. And one very important one actually made it easier to register to vote and easier to vote than ever before. While we don't have automatic voter registration in Michigan, we did make it so that people could register to vote online for the first time. We made it so that people could register to vote up to and including on election day. And we also made it so that people could vote by mail very easily without having to provide an excuse to the government. That was it's almost as if the voters in Michigan could predict the future, knowing that for our next major election, we would need more options to vote safely than we ever have needed before. And I'm very proud of the way Michiganders have taken advantage of those options thus far this year. As we are today, 12 days before November 3rd, which rather than being thought of as a traditional election day is the end of the voting season because people have started to vote in Michigan all the way back on September 24th. 1.6 million people in our state have already voted. They've already cast ballots. They have either voted in person, they've returned their ballots by mail. That is, almost 200% more than people. That's more than twice as many people who have ever voted absentee in the history of the state of Michigan. What that means is we are on pace for shattering records when it comes to voter participation in Michigan. Now, as a Michigan Democrat, I believe that when more people vote and participate in the process, I believe that positions Democrats for success in being able to win our state, not only at the presidential level for Joe Biden and Senator Kamala Harris to win, but also for the other important races that are on the ticket at the federal level. Most importantly, our United States Senate race, where we have United States Senator Gary Peters, who is competing to be reelected for his second term. We also, if you take another step down, and our former members of Congress will appreciate this. So we had two congressional seats that changed from Republican to Democrat in 2018. Congresswoman Alyssa Slotkin and Congresswoman Haley Stevens, and they are working to get reelected now their second terms. We also have two congressional seats that are potentially flippable that, places like the Cook Political Report have rated as toss-ups that could go either way. And I was actually with one of our candidates, Hillary Scholson, in the 3rd District yesterday in Western Michigan and in Battle Creek. I was actually in Battle Creek with her. And then I was in Southwest Michigan with the other candidate in the 6th District of Michigan. His name is John Hoadley, and he's working to defeat a long-term incumbent. So there are big opportunities for political gain in Michigan. And while I'm excited about that as a person who loves to campaign, while I am focused like a laser on increasing voter turnout in Michigan, and specifically, for those who can't see me on video, I am a Black man, and I have been specifically looking at how we can maximize not only Black voter turnout, but turnout amongst Black men in particular. I have been doing things like leading marches of Black men to vote. I led a march of 200 to vote in my hometown of Detroit. I've led people to vote in places like Flint, which some of you may have heard of because of our unfortunate water crisis 6 years ago in Flint, but also other cities where there are significant Black populations. So voter turnout is something that is important and exciting for me. But I want everyone to vote because there's so much at stake. As Governor Blanchard noted, we've had so many challenges, whether it comes to the pandemic, whether it comes to the economic collapse that is the result of the president's failure to manage or take seriously this pandemic. But also in Michigan, we have unique environmental challenges as being the home to more than 20% of the surface fresh water on the planet. We have an opportunity to really vote for leaders and vote for policymakers and vote toward an agenda that will help meet the needs of Michiganders across the board. And the governor also mentioned manufacturing. When we're thinking about the future of manufacturing, both in terms of the scale from the number of jobs, but also the types of work and what advanced manufacturing will look like, Michigan is really going to be continue to be at the center of that conversation of defining the manufacturing economy going forward. So I guess the other thing I'll share is during the pandemic, Michigan has been unique as far as our state response. Governor Gretchen Whitmer has been lauded, and that has been earned as one of the leaders who has been strongest and most decisive in terms of working to slow the spread of COVID-19 in our state. I think that is thanks in a meaningful way to the fact that, one, she actually respects and was willing to listen to public health experts and scientists. We were willing to collect and report data transparently and then make choices that were responsive to what that data indicated to us. And uniquely among states in the US, we made a choice to focus on our most vulnerable populations, including our elderly, but we also made a choice to focus on communities of color in our state and how this pandemic was impacting us differently. The reason for that is we've had generations of disparities when it comes to health outcomes, whether it's Black people in our state, Latino and Hispanic people in our state, our Native American and Indigenous people in our state have seen poorer health outcomes compared to our white counterparts when it comes to things like everything from high blood pressure or heart disease or upper respiratory infections. And what we noted in this pandemic is that when people who have those conditions, for example, or people who are just living and fighting with persistent poverty have been more likely to have bad or more severe outcomes from COVID-19. So as the state of Michigan, we prioritized responding directly to the needs of communities of color. The governor created the Michigan Coronavirus Task Force on Racial Disparities on April the 11th, and she appointed me to chair that task force. And we pulled together some of the greatest minds in our state, public health experts, epidemiologists, medical doctors, but also faith and religious leaders, labor leaders who are representing the people who have been, even though we had what we called stay home, stay safe orders to pause a lot of economic activity, there was still a tremendous amount of Michiganders who were working every single day. And they were disproportionately people of color. And so working to have workplace protocols and protections for them, working to have special protocols and processes to make sure that our educators had what they needed across the board. And what we've seen is that, to give you some numbers, in Michigan, just like a lot of the country, early on in March and in April, when this pandemic first was presented here in the state of Michigan, Black Michiganders make up 14% of the population, but we accounted for 41% of the people who passed away. Significant disparities in terms of being overrepresented in the people who passed. Well, thanks to the singular focus from our task force on racial disparities and our overall state response, doing things like expanding testing protocols and accessibility, inventing the way to do testing in your car through a drive-through, distributing 6 million masks for free across the state, including 2 million child-sized masks, coordinating with local departments and agencies, we've been able to flatten those disparities in Michigan, because over the last 2 months, what we've seen is that Black Michiganders, for example, have only accounted for less than 10% of the deaths rather than more than 40. So we believe that singular focus of the state has not only helped us deal with that specific problem of disparities, but it has also strengthened our overall state response to where we're in a position to have more economic activity begin to re-engage safely, where we're able to have more options for people who are looking to educate their children, whether in person or virtual or in a hybrid way. So we have to remain vigilant. You've been seeing numbers going up in very concerning ways across the country. And we have not seen a spike of the scale that has happened in other states, but we have been seeing our numbers trending in the wrong direction. And so we still need people to be careful in our state. And we also, however, need people to vote and vote safely, because we need better partners as state government officials in Michigan. We haven't gotten the support that we've needed from the White House. And that is one of the reasons why this election, the stakes, again, are so high for us. And we're working so hard and to make sure that we get a new administration that will be more supportive, more inclusive, more responsive to the needs, especially the most vulnerable people in the state of Michigan. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Governor. I know we have some questions to talk through, but I want to thank everyone for inviting me to be part of this conversation today.
Well, we appreciate you interrupting your busy schedule. I know you're moving all around Michigan, even with the pandemic. You are out and about, socially distanced, but out and about, not just doing Zoom meetings. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, and we'll go to the audience, and I'll kick it back to David. What do they talk? What are average voters talking about, and how does that differ from those in the African American community? By way of context, by the way, you mentioned that 14% of the people in Michigan are African American. They're not just in Detroit. They're in the Detroit suburbs. They're in cities like Flint, Saginaw, Lansing, Battle Creek, Muskegon. By the way, historically, we've had a higher percentage of people whose ancestors were from Germany. Now, they came over long ago, but settled all over doing farming initially. But of course, now very much focused on things like business and manufacturing. But what's on their mind? What are they saying to you? And how different is that in the African American community from the non-African American community?
Sure. So really what's front of mind for people in Michigan are two things: health and the economy. So health in terms of both the pandemic and the pandemic response, but also health in terms of real concern about access to healthcare. It's really present in this election, the risk of the Affordable Care Act, of Obamacare, being taken away from people. And that was meaningful in the state of Michigan. We under using Obamacare, we were able to get 800,000 people in Michigan who didn't have health insurance access to health insurance, so they could have health insurance during this pandemic. And people are really concerned about that. People who have pre-existing conditions, up to and including the tens of thousands of people who have contracted COVID-19 in the state of Michigan. That would be a pre-existing condition going forward. And if that was to get gutted by the Supreme Court or by Republicans in the United States Congress or Senate, or by a second-term President Trump, that would be devastating to our communities. And so that's the thing I hear about first and foremost. It's almost impossible for me to go anywhere and to see or to speak to someone who doesn't know someone who's contracted COVID-19, someone who's died from COVID-19. And that extends to me personally. I have 23 people in my life who've died from COVID-19. And in the Black community in particular, those numbers are quite high. I mean, everyone has, unfortunately, family members and friends and coworkers and stuff who they know who've been directly impacted, have been infected, have been in the hospital, or have passed away. This on the economy, people recognize, and again, there's sort of two pieces of this. So the first piece that existed, I think it was present before the pandemic, is always the question of, how can we lay a foundation for the future of our economy? Like, we understand that manufacturing is evolving, but people are also thinking about, are we preparing Michigan's economy for the future so that my kids, whether you have young children like I do, I have twin 7-year-olds and a little baby, but we have young people who are in high school or who are going to college and thinking about what kind of job opportunity is going to be there for them in the state of Michigan. And then the second piece on the economy is people concerned about the economic collapse due to the failed COVID-19 response at the federal level. People are worried about, we just passed a law to extend the amount of time that people would be eligible for unemployment benefits, for example, because many people's places of business have had to either still be on pause or still had to have reduced hours and reduced staff. People are very concerned about access to childcare because they need childcare in order for them to be able to go to work. They have some place for their kids to go if they have young children. So the economy and health are front of mind. And so pretty much every candidate at every level, that is what they're talking about. every voter that I speak to, they're coming to me about one of those two things. And I believe we have an opportunity because I think we have an agenda as Democrats up and down the ticket, whether it is at the state legislature level in Michigan, our candidates for the United States Congress and the United States Senate, or even the candidates for the Supreme Court at the state level, which is elected in Michigan. We have people who are ready to, ready to get to work and really help solve problems on those two key issues.
I want to mention, and before we turn it over for questions, and I know that there are questions, I've known Joe Biden for 46 years. Our viewers may understand that he ran extremely well in the primaries in the African-American community. My guess is he'll get over 90% of the African-American vote, which is why it is so important, among other reasons. Explain, though, his appeal to the African-American community and how that will be enhanced by the campaigning by former President Barack Obama, who's been out on the campaign trail as of yesterday. Explain that.
Yeah. So, yes, Vice President Biden does have a unique relationship with Black voters. And there are a lot of reasons for that, but I'll kind of work backwards, if you will. So as folks may remember, Vice President Biden served as vice president alongside Barack Obama, the first Black president and only Black president in our history. One of the reasons that is significant is not just the fact that it happened, like not just the fact that he was there every day alongside the Black president, but how he served alongside President Obama really does matter. And when I say that, what I mean is President Obama was obviously this sort of once in a lifetime, singular type of leader and individual. And Vice President Biden is someone who never tried to, undermine or kind of get in front of him or get in his way. He was a completely supportive and responsive partner to President Obama. And the reason that's important is because it's meaningful for Black folks to see, frankly, a white man like Joe Biden not be intimidated by someone like Barack Obama, but instead be completely supportive and being a willing, trusting, and faithful partner. And so that really means something in the community to know that that shows that he's a good man. He's a man who is ready to work alongside us to make sure that we can get what we need for our communities. I think the other piece is that Joe Biden is a type of elected leader who is always willing to show up, always willing to be there for people. And he has a special relationship with the state of Michigan. It was Joe Biden who President Obama asked to be kind of the steward of the middle class. And the middle class was basically invented in the state of Michigan through our manufacturing economy. When our automotive industry and our manufacturing industry in Michigan was on the brink of collapse and calamity due to the recession in 2008, it was Joe Biden who President Obama asked to help make sure that we could save the auto industry. And that same auto industry that we saved in 2009, that's the same industry then that was there for our nation to help to produce personal protective equipment and gowns and ventilator components and stuff like that. Those same manufacturing, those plants would have closed 10 years ago had it not been for Joe Biden. And people, and the people who are working in those plants, my family members. That's what my grandfather came up from Alabama to work in. My other grandfather came up from Florida after to work in those factories and stuff like that. So he's been someone with a history showing up for our community. And then I'll say again, some of the dynamics this year are enhanced with Senator Kamala Harris being his running mate. Senator Kamala Harris is also in her own right a historic and transformational figure. She's been like the first of everything she's ever been elected to, whether it was as a district attorney or as attorney general of the state of California, and now being the first Black woman and first to be represented on a presidential ticket at this level. And she will be a history maker if and when her and Joe Biden do win the election on November 3rd. And she, again, is sort of uniquely poised to be a representative and a supportive partner, but a powerful partner of making difference-making policy that the community will really feel, especially when it comes to the areas of, again, protecting healthcare, but also criminal justice reform, which she has a unique history, experience, and perspective on. So I think that this not only the vice president, but this team is something that I think is that Black folks are ready to respond to. I will say one more thing, Governor, that, one of the stories or one of the narratives of this election cycle that has become front and center is that not only this Black turnout, but specifically the sort of way that Black women always turn out in such big and record numbers, but that Black men in 2016 were, 13% of us actually voted for Donald Trump, which I find very concerning. And so I have spent a lot of my time during this campaign season working to increase Black male turnout and also make sure that they're more likely to vote for Joe Biden than they were in 2016. And that's why I did some of those activities that I described earlier in terms of literally like marching Black men to the polls, making sure that people understand what's at stake. We have some communications campaigns and stuff like that we're doing to make sure that folks know what they need to do.
Great. I want to kick it over now and hand it back to David. I know there are a lot of questions. I can hear your baby in the background.
Yeah, you can.
But I know there are a lot of questions. I know your time is limited. So, David, I'm going to hand this back to you for a while, and then we can continue. I know there's a lot of interest here, Governor.
Well, absolutely. Lieutenant Governor, thank you so much for your most enlightening talk. That was very, very interesting indeed. And thank you, Governor Blanchard, for leading us through the discussion so far. We do have a question here from our German member from Munich, Daniel Schellenberg. He's actually a tech entrepreneur, and he wants to know, do you think that Donald Trump might still be able to win the election? And how concerned are you that despite the polls, which we see at the moment, which favor Joe Biden, that Trump might still win? And he, of course, emphasizes that we had a similar situation back then in 2016 when the polls suggested that Hillary Clinton would win the race. And then in the end, it didn't turn out that way. So what is your view on that?
Yeah. So a couple things. One, as a recovering tech entrepreneur, I appreciate that. I part of my bio, I've started and sold a couple technology companies, and I used to be a software developer. So I appreciate that. Look, there is a non-zero chance that Donald Trump could be reelected. That is factually true. This election is going to, the voting dynamics are so different. One of the big things we're going to see that's going to be unique is I believe that Democrats will be overrepresented in the people who are choosing to vote early or to vote by mail this election season. And Republicans will be overrepresented in the people who vote on traditional election day, November 3rd. That can lead to some very potentially confusing dynamics when it comes to the vote tabulating process and how that is reported, which is why, in Michigan, we're being very careful and will be very careful about how we report out results, because we do not want to feed or fuel any rumors or misinformation or disinformation, or to use a more blunt term, lies about what is happening in terms of the voting process and the vote counting process. And so we have some concerns about that we're working to mitigate on the process side. But this is why we have to work so hard. While I think the polling numbers feel similar to 2016, the dynamics around those numbers are a bit different when it comes to the Biden-Trump matchup versus the Clinton-Trump matchup. But nevertheless, again, Michigan was the closest state in the country. So there is no Michigander who doesn't want Donald Trump to be reelected who is taking anything lightly, and so my challenge to every person is to, how many people have you spoken to today about this election? How many people today are you making sure know how to vote? Are you making sure that they know how to make a plan to vote? We also are starting to encourage people to not put their ballots in the mail between now and Election Day, because there have been direct, threats made to the U.S. Postal Service. And so we're encouraging people to drop their ballots off in person. And again, in Michigan, there are more options for dropping your ballot off in person before Election Day than there ever have been before. I think if we're able to execute on all of those elements of the mechanics of voting this year, I think we'll certainly get the result we're looking for in Michigan. And I think that Michigan is going to be is one of those states that if Vice President Biden is able to win Michigan, it'll be an indicator that he's going to win some of those other states that he needs to deliver the presidency: Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, et cetera, which was those were the three states that fell, which really delivered the presidency for Donald Trump. And in Michigan, we're trying to lead the way to flip that to a victory for Vice President Biden.
Thank you so much, Lieutenant Governor. We have another question here from our German member, Joachim van der Goltz, and he would like to know, given the dynamics around the social and racial dynamic in Michigan, how did Trump manage to win the state last time around? Was it a vote against Clinton? What is the percentage of swing voters?
Yeah, so I think there's a few things at play here. So most importantly, honestly, the Donald Trump presidency in 2016 was an idea. It was a theory. It was something to predict how this may or may not work. In 2020, the Donald Trump presidency has proven to be a deadly reality, a failure on almost every level, particularly for communities of color, given that we're talking about what race dynamics. Donald Trump very, very famously and unfortunately said to Black voters in 2016, "What the hell do you have to lose?" And I think that in 2020, it has been made abundantly clear that we have our lives at stake, our livelihoods at stake, our families' health at stake. We have so many things that are really here and that are important and critical for us to think about as we vote. So I think that, first of all, I think the difference between actually voting for an idea, like let's see what happens, and then voting against, like, this man has been actively terrible, and the way that he is, corrupted and gutted so many important functions of government, those failures have been really detrimental to our communities. I think that's one piece. And then I think the second piece, again, is this is ultimately elections in America are choices between people. And as you will no doubt see in the final presidential debate tonight, these are very different people. These are very different people. Like, Joe Biden is just like the kind of person who has the kind of leadership qualities that we should all want in leaders. A person who listens to people, a person who does the work to try to understand people's perspectives, who is capable of empathy. And in this time when we are all leading and living through something we've never lived nor led through before, those are important qualities. And so I believe that people will make a different choice this year. And I'm still going to work, my tail off to try to make sure that happens.
Lieutenant Governor, if it's still okay for you, I would ask another question, maybe a final question from our viewers. It's Michael Kolz, who is a former TV journalist from Germany, now working for AT&T. And he is asking, why do you believe, you've partially, I think, addressed that question, but let me ask it again in this manner on behalf of Michael. Why would you believe that the Dems are better prepared in the swing states, i.e. in the Rust Belt? How about the motivation to vote at all within the Black community? The votes were those votes were part of the reason why Hillary Clinton lost. So what about those people who might not be inclined to vote at all? And how do you address that?
Yeah. I'm focused on this very, very specifically, actually. So, I think there are two sides of the voting coin. There's one side that is, what are you voting against? And in this case, again, as I said in my previous response, the reality, the deadly, destructive reality of the Trump presidency, particularly for the Black community, for communities of color, is clear and present for a lot of people. And so that's something that we need to describe and then need to make sure people know how to respond to that. The other side of that, though, of that coin is, what are people voting for? And I believe that this is actually a tremendous opportunity. So the platform that Vice President Biden and Senator Kamala Harris are running on when it comes to racial justice and racial equity in America is, I'm sorry, hold on one second. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm back. I'm back. So the call that their platform is the most progressive and expansive racial justice and racial equity plan that's ever been presented to American voters in a general election. And it's not even close. Like in terms of the level of explicit direct investment in economic and educational opportunity with for Black folks and communities of color is unprecedented. And so I think that, again, we have exciting things to vote for, not just bad things to vote against. And I think that that's what's going to make a difference in that dynamic.
Thank you so much, Lieutenant Governor. That's it so far from the question from our audience. If I may just ask, Governor. You.
Follow-up comments too, but go ahead, David, do your questions.
Yeah, I was just wondering, Lieutenant Governor, how you see actually the situation at the moment, how you assess it, given the kind of insecurities around the election night itself. What do you see might happen? I know there's a lot of speculation, a lot of number crunching, 538 and all the pollsters and platforms to try to analyze it. But what do you think will actually happen that night? Will we, how likely do you think there might be the famous landslide, or how many states Biden would have to win so that we know already during the night what the actual result of the
I wouldn't bank on us knowing the results on November 3rd. I wouldn't bank on that. I don't expect us to have the results in Michigan on November 3rd and in many states on November 3rd. And so I think we need to be patient. This will be a cultural shift in America to recognize that it's going to take a few days for us to count all of our ballots. And that's okay. In Michigan, we're prioritizing getting the count right, make sure the count is accurate. Accuracy is better than speed when it comes to something as important as the result of the election. But I do believe that, the Vice President and Senator Harris, I think they're doing the work they need to do to win. And I think that we're going to deliver Michigan for them. I'm not going to predict a margin, but I do believe that we're going to deliver the state of Michigan. And as I indicated before, I think as Michigan goes, there will be other states that will sort of follow in our footsteps, if you will. And I think that will lead to delivering the presidency for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. In terms of the scale of that victory, I'm going to be honest, I don't really care what the scale of the victory is as long as they win. But I understand that the narrative is different when it comes to the sort of gap in victories. But ultimately, at the end of the day, this is about, democracy, team sport. The biggest team wins. And I'm just trying to get our team to be as big as possible in Michigan. And I think that we're trying to close strong here in these last 12 days. And when we do that, I think that we will win.
Thank you.
I appreciate y'all. I gotta take off. I gotta take off, unfortunately, but thank you so much. Thank you, David, Patrick, and Governor Blanchard, my friend. I want y'all to know that Governor Jim Blanchard is such a generous man. He has been so encouraging, supportive, and helpful to me as a public servant. This is my first elected office. And the reason that I've been able to enter into this work with some level of confidence is because people like Governor Blanchard have had confidence in me. So Governor, thank you as always for your support and encouragement.
Thank you for helping us out today. We really appreciate the time you've made for us. And as you know, I'm a big fan of yours. You're already a great success, but I think you're going to be a key player in American government and politics for many years to come. So wish you very well. And of course, I wish you really well on the campaign trail. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you very much. Gratitude all on our side. Thank you so much, Lieutenant Governor, and thank you, Governor Blanchard. That was fantastic. And thank you for taking the time again.
If I might, about the difference between this year and 4 years ago with Hillary. My background is I have worked on 12 presidential campaigns over the years and oversaw Bill Clinton's campaign here in Michigan, where he was very popular. So when Hillary lost Michigan to Donald Trump by 10,704 votes, it was a combination of factors. I think people were ready for change because we'd had a Democratic president for 8 years. And Hillary really represented to them the status quo. It's true, she didn't quite get the African-American turnout that we normally would want, but there was also a surge of white rural voters for Trump. Big surge over even when Obama was running. And a lot of that had to do with immigration, nativism, I'm being diplomatic. Some of it was racism. And so there was that going on. Plus, our party was not as united as it is today. And I think people thought that Michigan should be automatically a Democratic state, so there wasn't the campaigning here. So there are really a combination of reasons. But I can tell you the party is more unified now. Joe Biden won our primary convincingly. And they've expended a lot of time and money in advertising and campaigning in Michigan. And all of a sudden, the status quo is Donald Trump. And people just don't like to see that. So I think Joe Biden will carry Michigan. And I would say to your group, because I know you're looking at other states, look at Arizona. That's an emerging battleground. If Arizona goes for Biden, then we actually wouldn't need Pennsylvania, for example. My guess is they're all going to move in the same direction. And I'm hopeful it'll be a decisive victory. But things are so much different. The other thing I want to say is Joe Biden believes in international cooperation. He believes in global engagement. And so I want to say to our friends from Germany that it's our fervent hope and the hope of all the people I know that we will restore our friendships and relations with Germany, France, England, the rest of the world, whether it's rejoining the Paris Climate Accord or working on trade or working for peace. Our hope is that you can never go back to exactly the way things were, but we're really hoping that our partnership with Germany will be enhanced and strengthened for the future, for the well-being of all of our citizens. And I wanted to say that because I know that's how Joe Biden feels.
I think there couldn't be a better way to end this conversation today. Of course, we all hope for an improvement of that transatlantic partnership, which isn't great at the moment. I think one can say that. Regardless of the outcome of the election, we hope for that, of course. Thank you so much, Governor Blanchard, really for taking the time for your moderation and also for your comments. That was very helpful indeed. And thank you so much to our partners at FMC, Sabine Schleid and Patrick Eggenhofer for setting this up. Thank you to our audience for taking the time and their questions as well. Goodbye and see you soon.